So today we're going to discuss John Donne. And John Donne was a very important writer during the Renaissance period. He was known mostly for writing passionate, argumentative poetry, most of which he never really intended to be publicized. Donne wanted to become a courtier, and that's basically a member of the Queen's government, but he was at a huge disadvantage. For one, he was born into a Roman Catholic family. And secondly, he was a descendant of Sir Thomas More, who had been beheaded by Henry VIII back in 1535. Donne's friends described him as a very outgoing individual. He was a person who would frequently attend plays, he loved to visit the ladies, and he was a great writer of conceits or conceited verses, and mostly metaphysical conceits. And a metaphysical conceit is a complex and clever figure of speech that makes surprising connections between two totally dissimilar things. When we read John Donne's The Flea, we'll make the connections between the flea itself and another object that we'll go deeper into as we annotate that text. So Donne experienced a lot of discrimination in his schooling. For instance, he was actually attending Oxford by the age of 12, but he was barred from obtaining a degree because of his religious beliefs. And again, he was a part of the Roman Catholic religion. And so because of this, he returned home to his native city of London, and in his late teens, he decided to become a law student at Lincoln's Inn. And Lincoln's Inn was one of the inns of court where lawyers were trained. So at this point in his life, Donne had no worries financially. He was receiving an inheritance from his father's death because his father died when he was about 4 years old. And so because he had received this inheritance, he became new and improved, changing his name or becoming known as Jack Donne instead of John. And he started to dress a little bit better. He focused heavily on reading philosophy and foreign literature. And again, he started to circulate in the community to become very social in the community. And so during this time, he was also very adventurous. After various adventures, including joining 2 naval expeditions against Spain, Donne became the private secretary to Sir Thomas Egerton, who was the Lord Keeper of the Great Seal. This was important because Donne was finally able to have a career in government. Remember, he was denied early on because of his religious beliefs and because of his association with Sir Thomas More. So Donne begins his brilliant career in government, and by now he has abandoned Catholicism and spent all of his inheritance. So then in 1601, at this time he was about 29 years old, he ends up marrying illegally. He marries Anne More, who is no relation to him, and because she's a minor, this means that Donne has violated both the church and the state. He did not get Anne Moore's father's consent to marry his daughter, and so this is a serious crime during this time. And because of that, Anne's father has Donne arrested, jailed, and he loses this great government job that he's been waiting on. And so while in jail, Donne writes his shortest poem, and it reads, "John Donne, Anne Donne, undone." And this was very important because they technically weren't done. They actually remained married because Donne didn't spend much time in prison. And although he lost his position, he and Anne still continued their relationship, and they went on to have 12 children during this marriage, 5 of which died during infancy. But in the early 1600s, Donne continued to read and write. When he wrote his poetry, that was mostly for private circulation. When he wrote prose, it was for public consumption. But he also began to write against the Church of Rome. And he wrote so effectively that he became known as an important defender of the Church of England. So the new king, which was King James I, persuaded Donne to become a clergyman. And this was in around 1615. When Donne became a clergyman, he became known for his brilliant theatrical sermons, which immediately won him advancement in the church. And so by the time of his death in 1631, Donne had become honorable, and he had become a successful gentleman who was well respected in his community. And there's also a portrait of Donne that can be seen in St. Paul's, showing how he looked during his death. And for the people of England, this would be very important. And his portrait and his contribution to poetry and prose would still also be very important. So we're going to discuss more about John Donne. We're going to read a couple of his texts. But I just wanted to give you this introduction to prepare you and give you some background information on this great poet and author.